The point is that when we talk about new controls, there's an opportunity to really make an advancement in a control, and when the control actually comes out, it's been watered down to the point where it's even more confusing than it was originally, or it doesn't do what it was originally intended, and I have concerns about that. If we're going to build a control set that is going to increase in effectiveness, we have to keep up with the times, and we have to look at the process by which the control is performed and improve it based on previous experience. I don't see that happening. I actually see it sometimes.
You can't put that on a checklist. That's not a checklistable commodity, because the QSA is not ever going to be the same. They don't take, sorry, not you. They don't take good notes. They don't provide transparency in terms of audit. You've got a bunch of people who are running around being assessors, play auditors, who don't have the training. They don't understand what an audit is. They're not licensed to do audits. And they're not performing an audit in such a way as it would provide you with any kind of useful experience. We call them audits, but they're not.
No, we call them assessments.
Not the people who are getting assessed. They call them audits. And they perceive them to have the same value as, you know, the really great audits like the SAS 70 Type 2. There's no working papers to speak of. There's certainly not working papers that are transferred year to year from auditor to auditor. There's no comprehension of timeline. There's these point-in-time assessments that don't tell you what the real state of affairs are. They tell you what the state of affairs are for that day, and that day may be the one day when all the compensating controls work because Bob, Jimmy, and Fred all showed up that day. This is not a system that is geared towards the nature of continuous compliance or the nature of regular auditability or instant auditability. This is a system that is designed to do exactly and only one thing, and that's to create the appearance of. It's just wallpaper over that shitty dump. There's not much else you can say for it.
A couple of observations on this. One that I look comes up to me regularly. In the security space, so we're here at DefCon because we want to know what is out on the front edge. We want to share what we've found, and we want to be out on the front edge of exploitability, vulnerability, and those of us that are concerned with the defense side, we use that to arm ourselves, at least intellectually, with the battle we're up against. If I have an epiphany sitting here or at B-sides when somebody says something, and I put my hand up and say, if I do this, will that stop that? And the answer is yes, and I'm going to go to market with this idea. If I'm lucky and it meets a checkbox so that I can get money because my credit cards are all tapped out, God knows my house isn't worth anything, so now I need to get venture money. So I get all of that, I build a company. I get a team of people, I put it together. I got a product, how long? 2 years? 2 years to market? If I'm doing good? If it's a small product, it's 6-8 months, but it's a very niche product. But let's say 2 years to market, and that's great. Now there's something that I can prescribe and put on a checklist that you have to have, this new technology.
I get tired of hearing people complain about the fact that PCI has a checklist.
Well,
let me make
the point there is that now for it to become part of a compliance mandate, it has to be mainstream and a technology or an approach to handling something that is accepted across the industry so that it can be prescribed, whether it's a checklist or whatever. So we're formerly 2, now 3 years out. So we're looking at a 5-year cycle from one of us having a brilliant idea in this room, well, not in this room, but one of the other rooms, and getting something that somebody is likely to tell us we need to defend our systems.
I'm going to call you out. If it's not a checklist, where are the measurement scales?
Okay, maybe you're right. It is a checklist, but the problem is the same people who are complaining about using it as a checklist, who are using it as a checklist and not going beyond it, are the same people that would have been looking and going, where can I find a checklist of best practices? The people who are in this room who are more experienced, who have actually had some time in the field, who are risk based or at least have the experience to know what the risks are actually going out and trying to go beyond and trying to figure out how your controls can be shaped shaped to meet the PCI requirements instead of just doing what PCI says. So that lower level in the earlier slide, those are the people who, a lot of them are the junior junior assessors, junior administrators, and people who just haven't had the time, who are working in a company where it's 200 people and 3 sysadmins, and that's the people who are doing the PCI. I think that there's just, people keep calling it a checklist and keep complaining about it instead of doing something and using it as a tool to push management towards doing something.
But meta-compliance is hard.
Yes, it is. It takes thought.
Okay, but hold on. We cannot let this pass. You used the phrase best practices. So first of all,
He did it first.
Foul.
He did it first.
Second of all, this stuff has to be couched. We need to, instead of whining about it or, like we're doing on the panel here, it's not best practice. It's not even, it's barely good practice. It's just north of negligent, right? I mean,
yes, but at least we're catching the low-hanging fruit. Can we start throwing the phrases?
Yeah, so we have raised the bar. It was 0 feet high, now it's 2 feet high. So did we waste 2 feet of fence? I don't know, but this has to stay vibrant. I mean, one of the things, it's not up on the slide right now, with that bell curve again, right, where we have the negligent. One of the biggest epiphanies we had was early in the debates on your podcast, I think. I think it was... I was critiquing the efficacy of the security controls, because if you look at the digital dozen, they're really old, and I'm pretty sure anybody in this room could compromise a fully compliant network, because it's not a very high bar. And I said, they can be trivially defeated by an amateur attacker. I think it was Mike Don who said, not if you do them right? Not if you use them right. And I had this blinding flash of the obvious. I said, wait a second, these folks are so irresponsible and negligent that they have to be forced to do something to protect card data, and yet we, on the same time, think they're going to flawlessly execute this stuff. So I think
100,000 merchants can do a better job of fixing the system than 3 card companies.
So really what it is I've been accused of this being a catchphrase, but I want the PCI Council and the standard to either better wield its power or yield its power. I don't mean give up. What I mean is, if we have figured out through intelligent, rational debate that community called the negligent will only do what they're forced to, then you can't get them 80% there or 50% there. You need to make that thing really vibrant, really current, really relevant, keeping up with evolutions in threat, keeping up with evolutions in technology, keeping up with changes in business, and it's not doing that. So if we want to do it, let's do it. And if it's just a diffusal of blame and money, then let's call it what it is, and let's not become lazy and complacent and just say, well, I'm going to do my audit work and then I'm done.
I'm going to pretend I'm Dave Shackleford for a minute. How many of you are looking at tokenization or end-to-end encryption, looking at something like what Harden or some of the other companies are doing, where you can buy a new POS and never actually have access to the credit card? Any of you out there looking at those? Not really. I mean, I look and I see barely a handful of hands coming up. If you're not looking at tokenization, at end-to-end encryption, at other technologies, I hate to tell you this, you're at the lower end of the bell curve. If you're not looking ahead at some of these technologies that he's talking about, you're at that low end of the bell curve, because you need to be looking ahead and saying, what can I do beyond this?
Because it's on you to fix the problem.
Wait, it's on those of us at the bottom end to do 2 things. If we care about security, we have to fix the problem, and we have to be compliant too.
Well, don't we have 2 budgets? Don't we have our compliance budget and that really, really big budget to secure our business? Right? But is there money left once you pass the audit?
So how do we change it? How do we put pressure on the PCI Council? How do we get involved in the SIGs? What do we do?
So we're going to shift gears for just a minute, because we have we do need to look at how we move forward and not just having an argument. And we have Alex has some thoughts on this, and it's good. I mean, PCI, there are a couple of different ways to look at PCI that are outside of just what we've been talking about now.
So we got folks lining up. Do you have a quick question, or is this comments, or?
It's a little bit of both.
Okay.
I can wait.
All right, that's fine. I'm quick. All right, you're quick. Go for it.
Okay, so it's a rigged game, right? That's what you're saying. But how's it rigged? So how many people in the room, other than QSAs, have seen the QA checklist that QAs have to turn into the council? Raise your hands. Right? Why is it that all these other people haven't seen it? Because it's not published, right? Okay, so people don't even know the checklist that they have to work against.
We don't either. We get feedback from the PCI Council, and it changes from day to day sometimes.
Oh, yeah, well, okay, so I went to the first merchant training that they gave back in the spring, and it was real interesting. I think they must have stock and depends or something, because that was the answer that they gave to pretty much everything. Well, it depends.
All right, so Mike Dunn, who's not here, I used to, okay, so real quick, who's kind of spun up about PCI in a negative way versus positive? Okay, so the rest of you are positive, or the rest of you are just like got pit stains and don't want to raise your hand? Or, I used to get real spun up about it. You know, Anton and Martin and Mike would have these
Buy his book.
Yeah, buy his book. They would have these blog posts, and I'd be like, "What sort of industrial solvents are you guys sniffing?" You know, this makes no sense to me at all. And then Mike Dunn was actually good enough to come out and buy some sweet Korean with me and the guy who ran PCI for a large insurance company and so forth. And I really kind of something clicked, and that was it ain't going to change. You remember I said that we have three things. You know, first, is it the right thing to do? Well, right now that's in the hands of politicians and bureaucrats, and we're not going to be able to change that. Second, is it the right thing to do in terms of securing a network? Although Allison Miller just tweeted or texted and said, you know, it's funny, it's not a network defense system, it's a card defense system. She's right. And the third thing is the right thing to do on a macrocosmic level. And we don't know, and we're not even trying to know. And so what we need to do is get through basically our stages of grief, and we need to get to the point where we're at acceptance, right? So with all deference to Jeremiah, who did this first, right? Denial is, I feel fine, this can't be happening, not to me. And we saw this, you know, DSW chose to take the fines for a while, I believe. Anger, why me? It's not fair, how can this happen to me? Who's to blame? You know, I'll do anything for a few more years out of bargaining. You know, well, can we delay this expenditure for a while? You know, depression. Our industry really is probably unevenly distributed through 1 through 4, right? Depending on who the managers are. Where should we be, I think, is the point of acceptance. And that's kind of where I got to, and that's what might click with me. All right? So I might as well prepare for it. So what does acceptance mean to me? Folks might disagree with me, but I believe that, you know, let's call it DSS, I'll just stick with that. It's a hypothesis, and E.T. James, if you're into logic and science and stuff, he has a great book, and he says, you know, basically all the models that we create, they're simply hypotheses, and they're built to be falsified, right? You apply scientific method, right? So, you know, basically, my assertion is we have with how many merchants, James?
100,000 or so.
Right. We essentially have a pretty good sample of networks, if you want to think about it in this way. We have the ability to establish control groups, we can do all sorts of studies, we can start doing something.
That information is proprietary.
Yeah.
To the PCI Council.
Hey, yeah, so I'm trying to
figure... We could sell that to you. You can buy a copy of all that data. Seriously, it's real cheap.
That's excellent. But basically, our organizations, I know TrustWave put out a report, my employer puts out a report, along with Mike, I wrote the PCI section this year. And I really think that as we look at our industry, we have two great things that we need to measure and figure out, right? And one is, we need some sort of measurement scale for the strength of a control, right? It has to be a rational scale. It can't be a 1 through 10. It can't be, you know, some ordinal scale. We can't multiply peanut butter by jet engine and get fast. You know, the world doesn't work that way, even despite what our GRC programs say. And the second thing is how do we consistently measure a strength of an attack? right? So if you look at PCI from a pure scientist's mind, stop being an engineer and say, this is a bridge, and how can we make the bridge stronger so that the next time a big